We spend the first 40 years of our lives building walls, structures of capital, reputation, and legacy. We've been taught that if we document our intentions, the state and the bank will act as our proxies when we are no longer here to speak for ourselves. This is the 20th century model of the safe deposit box. It is a model built on the assumption that wealth is a physical or legal entity that can be moved by a court order. But we are crossing a threshold. For the modern builder, wealth is no longer just paper and property. It is protocol and private keys. The sobering reality is that your digital legacy is currently haunting your estate plan. There is a statistical tragedy unfolding. Billions of dollars in digital assets are already lost. Not stolen, but simply unrecoverable because the keys died with their owners. This isn't a failure of wealth. It's a failure of architecture. The traditional executor, the family lawyer, the trusted banker, they are all powerless against an encrypted hash. If your legacy relies on a password that only exists in your head, or a seed phrase tucked into a book that your heirs will donate to a thrift store, you haven't built a legacy. You've built a digital bonfire. We must analyze why the tools we use to protect our father's assets are fundamentally broken for the assets we are building for our sons. This is the final audit. Let's examine the probate paradox. In the traditional world, the law is a slow script. When a man passes, the legal machinery grinds to a halt. Assets are frozen, creditors are notified, and a judge, a human being with a calendar, must eventually grant permission for wealth to move. This system assumes that time is an acceptable cost for certainty. However, in the world of decentralized protocols, a court order means absolutely nothing. A judge can gavel a desk until it breaks, but he cannot compel a smart contract to release funds without the correct cryptographic signature. This is where the friction begins. We are seeing a growing chasm between the legal system and non-custodial assets. The law operates on intent, what you wanted to happen. Protocols operate on logic, what the code is programmed to do. If your will says your Bitcoin goes to your daughter, but your private key is lost, the law is impotent. The protocol doesn't care about your last will and testament. It only cares about the math. We are moving into an era where the law is becoming a secondary layer, a narrative we tell ourselves, while the actual movement of value is dictated by immutable execution logic. For the man over 40, this means your estate plan is no longer just a legal document. It is a coding problem that requires a technical solution. This shift necessitates a fundamental change in how we define trust. We are transitioning from a world of permission to a world of proof. In the old world, your heirs would take a death certificate to a bank, ask for permission, and if the paperwork was in order, the bank would move the numbers. Trust was placed in the institution and the human intermediaries. In the new world, we do not ask. We prove. Possession of the math is the only truth the network recognizes. This is the difference between legal intent and execution logic. Legal intent is a wish. Execution logic is a certainty. As an educator bridging these two worlds, I see the danger in assuming they are the same. If you have spent decades accumulating a position in Bitcoin or other digital protocols, you have opted out of the permission-based system. But many men in our demographic have failed to complete the journey. They have the assets of the future but the estate planning of the past. They are still mentally relying on the idea that someone will fix it if things go wrong. But in a world of proof, there is no someone. There is only the key. If the proof is missing, the asset ceases to exist for your family. We must stop thinking about our wills as a list of desires and start thinking about them as a set of instructions for a machine that does not understand or care about human loss. Finally, we must address the specific risk profile of the 40-plus portfolio. This demographic, our demographic, is uniquely exposed. We are the bridge generation. We have the capital of the old world, the real estate, the brokerage accounts, the tangible holdings, but we have also been the primary builders and early adopters of the new digital infrastructure. We have portfolios that are split between two entirely different dimensions of custody. One half is protected by the slow, expensive, but familiar safety net of the legal system. The other half is sitting in a custody chasm. Assets that have significant value but are essentially invisible to the traditional estate plan. High net worth individuals over 40 often possess the technical curiosity to acquire digital assets, but lack the tech-native intuition to automate their handover. We are too young to ignore the future, but often too busy to secure it properly. This is the sober reality. You may have built a multi-million-dollar bridge to the future for your children, but if that bridge is missing its final plank, the technical handover, they will watch your legacy drift away from the shore, unable to reach it. There is no bank to call. There is no forgot password link for a legacy. This is the custody chasm, and it is the single greatest threat to multi-generational wealth in the 21st century. In the next part of our analysis, we will look at how to build that bridge using the very protocols that created the problem. In the traditional world, a will is a letter of intent. It is a request made to a probate court, a hope that a judge will honor your wishes and a bank will release your holdings. But as we transition into an era of protocol-based wealth, intent is secondary to execution. We are moving from the last will to the last script. When your assets live on-chain, the law is a slow, analog script attempting to interact with a high-speed digital reality. This is where the smart contract enters the frame, not as a replacement for legal counsel, but as the final executor of your estate. Imagine an automated inheritance protocol, a dead man's switch. It functions on a simple binary logic. If the owner does not interact with the wallet for a predetermined period, perhaps 6 months or a year, the protocol assumes incapacity or death. At that moment, the last script triggers. It doesn't ask for a death certificate. It doesn't wait for a court order. It executes a time-locked recovery, moving assets to designated beneficiary addresses or unlocking access to a secondary tier of keys. For the man over 40, this provides a sober form of certainty. You are no longer relying on the competence of a mid-level bank manager or the speed of a backlogged court system. You are relying on the immutable laws of mathematics. However, this shift requires a new form of stewardship. You are no longer just a patriarch. You are the lead architect of a private financial system. The question isn't whether you want your children to have your wealth. It's whether you've written the logic that allows them to receive it. We must be careful not to fall into the trap of technological fundamentalism. Pure code is efficient, but it is also cold and unforgiving. If your legacy relies entirely on a single smart contract or a single private key, you haven't built a bridge. You've built a trap. This is why the modern estate requires a human layer, what we call the Council of Peers. In the world of digital custody, we utilize multi-signature or multi-sig wallets. This is the digital equivalent of a vault that requires 3 out of 5 keys to open. You hold one. Your spouse holds another. Your most trusted advisor, perhaps a long-term lawyer or a tech-literate peer, holds a third. This architecture balances technical security with human judgment. Social recovery is the failsafe. If a key is lost, the remaining guardians can reconstitute access without needing a central bank. This is the Council of Peers model. It requires us to identify individuals in our lives who possess not just the integrity to hold a key, but the technical literacy to use it when the time comes. For the builder over 40, this is a selective process. You are choosing the executors of your digital sovereignty. You are moving away from a world of permission, where your family asks for what is theirs, to a world of proof, where the council demonstrates the collective authority to move the legacy forward. It is a more demanding way to live, but it is the only way to ensure that the wealth you've spent decades accumulating doesn't vanish into a digital void because of a single forgotten password. There is a silent killer of legacies that we rarely discuss in the boardroom: technical debt. For many of us, our digital estate is a patchwork of legacy systems, outdated hardware wallets, and seed phrases written on scraps of paper tucked into books. We call this the digital burn. When we analyze failure states in the final audit, we often find that the problem wasn't a lack of wealth, but a lack of accessibility. Consider the psychological burden you place on a grieving spouse or an adult child who is not tech-native. To them, your hardware wallet isn't a symbol of freedom. It's a source of anxiety. If they enter the PIN incorrectly 3 times, is the legacy erased? If the firmware hasn't been updated in 5 years, will the device even boot? This is the hidden cost of technical debt. As we age, our tendency is to set it and forget it. But in the digital realm, stable is an illusion. Software rots. Hardware degrades. Entropy is the enemy of the long-term holder. The final audit requires us to simplify. We must move from complex, bespoke setups to standardized, documented protocols. Your legacy plan is only as good as the least technical person's ability to follow it during a crisis. If your heirs require a PhD in cryptography to access their inheritance, you haven't left them a gift. You've left them a burden. We must proactively prune the complexity, ensuring that the bridge we build is wide enough and simple enough for the next generation to cross without fear. So, how does the modern patriarch secure the horizon? It begins with a calm, step-by-step framework. First, conduct a digital asset inventory. Catalog not just the value, but the custody method of everything you own. Second, transition from legal intent to execution logic. Supplement your traditional will with automated protocols, the dead man switches and time locks we discussed. Third, assemble your council. Select the 3 to 5 individuals who will hold the fragments of your digital keys and ensure they are trained in the protocol. Finally, and most importantly, perform a fire drill. Once a year, sit down with your heirs and walk through the recovery process. Let them feel the hardware. Let them see the interface. Demystify the math. Our duty as builders is not merely to accumulate, but to preserve and pass on. In the physical world, we built fences and vaults. In the digital world, we build logic and protocols. The transition from the 20th century model of trust to the 21st century model of proof is the final hurdle in a life well lived. Your wealth is no longer a matter of what a lawyer can argue in court. It is a matter of what your code can execute in the silence of the network. This is the sober reality of the final audit. Ensure your script is ready. Ensure your bridge is sound. Because in the end, the algorithm doesn't care about your intentions, it only cares about your architecture. I am the horizon. Let us build for the long term.